And we are back through a combination of community service, leadership development, and advocacy. The Muslim Community Network is actively reshaping the public narrative surrounding the Muslim experience in the U.S., striving for a future where peace, justice, and inclusivity are at the forefront. Their commitment to bringing stronger communities through education and service continues to inspire and uplift. Joining me now is the Executive Director of the Muslim Community Network, Husein Yatabarry, and we thank you so much for joining us, Husein.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for having me. I feel like I was in your closet today.
Yeah, brother, you got it on, man. It's good. It's good. It's good to have you.
Good to have good to be on your show. Thank you
Th-
so much.
Thank you. A lot of work that's going on, and a lot of work in terms of really feeding the community, being engaged with the community, and if you could share a little bit about, first of all, the Muslim Community Network.
Yeah, Muslim Community Network was started back in 2003 after 9/11, and our goal has been to redefine and shape the narrative around being Muslim in America. Like you said earlier, through three core pillars, which is community development, leadership development, and advocacy. And I think right now, like our organization, we're being tested with a lot when it comes to immigration, hate crime prevention, and just free speech rights when it comes to Muslim Americans and just all Americans and what they can say in opposition to the federal government. So I have staff members right now in Foley Square. The case of Mahmoud Khalil has been a large looming case that's caught national media attention. And these are all things that we're fighting to combat.
A lot of work that's going on in, things from food insecurity to criminal justice, social justice, really doing that. How have you been able to address, you talked about 9/11, and there's been this Islamophobia hike since
Yeah.
9/11, and we know that. And for our brothers and sisters in the Muslim community, obviously, a lot of unjust and unwarranted eyes. What's it been like, and what's the Islamophobia been like for you, particularly recently?
Yeah, I think specifically we had a case in Kensington, Brooklyn, where a mosque, there was a man outside of a mosque that was producing hate speech on a megaphone. So connecting with that mosque in order to see what they need, we're actually setting up a advocacy iftar with them, along with Councilwoman Shana Hanif's office and Jay Fredge, Jewish for Economic Justice, and trying to kind of build that bridge and build a support system around mosque and community members so that because they might not know access to all the resources that they are entitled to, so making sure that nonprofits and orgs like ours are able to come in, tell them the actual things that they have access to and how they can combat whenever these kind of scenarios do happen. We're doing diversity education with outside communities to make sure they understand more about Muslim communities and the cultures which people come from. And then also we're doing the hate crime prevention within our own Muslim community so people also understand how to be a good upstander. And like we also do teach some self-defense classes to people that are like scared or may have been victim to hate crimes in the past and want to make sure they're able to physically defend themselves if ever in those scenarios. So it's some defense and then some offense in trying to make sure like we're pushing to outside communities what it means to be Muslim, especially in this month of Ramadan that we're in, making sure people really understand what Ramadan is about and the message of Islam.
Yeah. For you, how's it been, uh, given the fact that we're in this heightened society? We know that, Islamophobia is real, but then you walk the streets of New York City. We understand just a few miles away, we are from the former World Trade Center. And yet and still, for a lot of New Yorkers, that's very visible, that's very real. And for those in the Islamic community, Islamophobia is something that they incur on a daily basis. Have you found possibly that things have gotten better?
I think it's ebbs and flows. There are times when things do get better. I think it all depends on the rhetoric. And I think when you have time periods in American society when the rhetoric is tame, I think that Muslim communities do feel better, but I think in this current federal administration, the rhetoric is more heightened against pro-Palestinian or whatever people want to label Muslims that may be active on the civic scene or the protest scene, and it does breed some more hate. I definitely do believe international affairs play a big part. So I would say everything that is happening in Gaza has a huge role to play in like the increased Islamophobia that has reared its head. And I think we are at an inflection point with the case of Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia student who is being detained, is a permanent resident, and is being held because of free speech and the things that he has said. And he's being detained and potentially going to be deported. I mean, the court case is going on today, but then it does split society into camps when it shouldn't be that way. We have First Amendment rights, but those are being trampled on. If you dare speak out against a government, then there will be Islamophobia that will be pushed onto the public.
Yeah, Islamophobia is huge, and it's certainly something that too many people have to contend with. I do want to talk about bridging the gap, though, because when we talk about bridging the gap, one of the great ways is through diversity. And I know the D word is not a great word on the part of those in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but right here, it's a good word. And I believe there's a lot that can be learned through diversity. You also engage in diversity education. Can you share with our viewers a little bit about the diversity education that the Muslim Community Network engages in and what you've seen as a result?
Yeah, so we work with different corporations, schools, government agencies, and we take them through our diversity education curriculum, which is in three parts. It's understanding Muslim diversity and cultures, a deep dive into Islamophobia, and then lastly, how to connect with Muslim communities and families. So it's a three-part. It's understanding the community, how the root of the Islamophobia and the stereotypes that you may have internally, and then how do you then connect with those families now that you know that you did have some preconceptions about these communities and you didn't really understand them before. And we've just seen wonders, especially at the school level, whether it's public schools or college campuses, and also private schools, where people are like, "Oh, I didn't know that's why this was happening," or "I didn't know how to connect with my students during Ramadan," or "I didn't know how to connect with their families," or "I didn't know why the mothers did not engage in these events, but only the fathers did." So kind of understanding some of the cultural nuances of different communities, but then also the religious aspect of it, because they're not the same. They're very separate. Just like any major religion, you have multiple denominations, and within those denominations, based on where they're from in the world, it's going to be practiced a little bit differently. So you will have more like orthodox versus more liberal, progressive kind of wings of different denominations. And I would say it's really come away with the diversity education, and it's also really helped build some bridges with other communities. I do feel like there is a lot of solidarity with other communities. And like we've been bridging gaps even with our counterparts in Jewish communities, organizations like JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace, and JFresh. Those have been great partners of ours during this time period when there is a lot of division and people are starting to stoke fires, where we're connecting with other Christian members of communities as well, whether it's Methodist churches or Baptist churches. And at the end of the day, the goal is peace. The goal is human rights and standing up for human rights, and making sure people are able to speak freely, live freely, and love freely. And I think that's the main goal of diversity education. And we're seeing some steps happening in that direction. And like you said, with the federal administration, it's difficult because states and municipalities are scared to fund diversity efforts nowadays because they might get their funding shut off. So it's actually like organizations have to step outside of government and getting government assistance to push diversity education to communities because the federal government um, might retaliate against them for pushing diversity efforts.
Yeah. What's going on today is the network is doing some great work. Also, feed the community during Ramadan. I want to get an opportunity for you to have you share a little bit about that.
Of course. So today and every Wednesday of Ramadan. So this is today, March 12th, March 19th, March 26th, on the mosque on 222 East 97th Street, Islamic Cultural Center of New York. We distribute 500 meals for everyday New Yorkers, migrant communities, working New York communities. They all come to that mosque to receive free meals. We're in partnership with the Comptroller's Office and Islamic Relief USA. These are nutritious meals, usually rice and some kind of protein. We even have vegan options with falafel. Usually has a couple dates inside your bag and like a water bottle. So like it's a full kit. So as soon as you pray Maghrib, you break your fast. The meal's called iftar. You have your iftar, and it's called iftar on the go. So you can have it and take it out of the mosque, and maybe some people are cab drivers or delivery workers. You can eat your meal outside, or you can eat your meal in the mosque itself. But it's a wonderful time to connect with communities, and we have so many non-Muslims that also volunteer with us in order to do the distributions.
Yeah.
Also, throughout the month, we also host food pantries in multiple boroughs where we're giving produce for households, and that's because our households are cooking large feasts and large meals for suhoor, which is in the morning at sunrise when people stop eating, and then for iftar at sunset when they break their fast. So families are doing this constant cooking. So we're going to different boroughs and we're partnering with different food pantry partners in order to provide these fresh produce and fresh goods and sometimes some fresh eggs because we know the price of that and how families appreciate having those things for free.
For yourself, what is the most gratifying part of all of this?
Being able to empower my community. I think growing up, I've been part of a community that has been alienated. I've been part of a community that is always in constant fear. And I think that community is finding its voice in 2025 and is finding ways to speak up for itself. But I'm also hopeful seeing other communities stand with us and say, like, the Muslim community is a good community. They're an American community and they're part of our fabric. And there is no separation between them and us. It's just an us. And I think that's what we have to really come to. There's just an us. And we have to stand up for each other. We have to make sure our neighbors are safe. We have to make sure our neighbors are comfortable. And when they're not, we stand up for our neighbors. And just being part of that process, that makes me feel good. And I'm hoping to hear good things today from our solidarity movements down by City Hall, at the courthouses, and making sure Mahmoud Khalil is free.
I don't want to, this could take 20 minutes. I only have about 3, but I just want to get to you before we wrap up. The present political climate, what has that meant for you as an organization? And how has that, pretty much affected you in the work that you do, given the fact that there is so much anti-rhetoric that's coming out of federal government?
It makes the work extremely difficult, I would have to say. The onslaught of executive orders, the onslaught of the Secretary of State getting involved in local matters. I think if organizations we're being very reactive right now. It's hard to be proactive when there's something new every single day. Whether it's tariffs that affect families and their homes on the affordability crisis, whether it's the anti-DEI efforts that's trying to show division within our society, whether it's anti-immigrant efforts that is also showing division in our societies and making people fearful, affecting the economy, affecting our national security, and the fundamental values of free speech. You cannot, in this 2025 society, say negative things around the federal government, or you are in fear. Even myself, like in our organization, we have to be careful with our criticism because your funding can get cut off, and then you have to pay your employees. These are all things that organizations fear. That's very scary when this nation has been built on some fundamental values. But if you're not within a specific camp and you're not bowing down to powers that be, your funding can get shut off. You can be under investigation and surveillance, and everything that you have worked for within your community can be for naught. So I think in this time period, us all standing together in solidarity and saying, hey, you cannot infringe upon our rights, and we must stand together to make sure our government is working for us. But it seems like nowadays we're supposed to work for our government, which doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, I got to leave it there, but I want to tell you this. The work that you're doing is definitely impactful. Want to continue to salute you for that. And hopefully, as we are living in this climate, there'll be more tolerance and more understanding. But I really appreciate the fact of knowing that, you know, the diversity education that goes on, because I think that's the only way we're really going to make our society better is if we do take the time to have some diversity education. So I do want to take the opportunity to say thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll have you back.
Thank you so much for having me. I end off by saying free Mahmoud Khalil, peace in Gaza, peace in Congo, peace in Sudan, peace all over the world. Blessings to everyone. And I'm just hoping that 2025, we start to see some more glimmers of hope and light within our communities.
All right. Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us.